If you've been doom scrolling or honestly just casually scrolling at all this January, there is one phrase you absolutely cannot escape.
Mm.
It's on all the chyrons, it's in the op-eds, it's trending everywhere. The Board of Peace.
It sounds lovely, doesn't it? Very aspirational, almost soothing.
It really does. It sounds like a committee of, well-meaning diplomats in Geneva sitting around a mahogany table,
Right.
maybe finalizing a treaty over espresso. It sounds safe, standard.
Mm.
But we've got a stack of documents here, leaked memos, draft charters, analysis from both Washington and Brussels. And they tell a very, very different story.
A radically different story. And safe is probably the last word I'd use to describe it.
Because what we're looking at isn't just a generic committee. We are potentially looking at the biggest pivot in how the world manages war and peace since, 1945?
I think that's fair to say.
We're talking about a new institutional structure. It's designed to govern the post-war phase in the Gaza Strip. It involves major world leaders, billions in funds, and this fundamental, almost philosophical rupture between the U.S. and its oldest European allies.
That's the key context. This isn't just about Gaza. I mean, obviously, the immediate mission is reconstruction, dealing with the absolute devastation there.
Of course.
But if you read between the lines of these documents, the Board of Peace is a prototype. It's a laboratory for a whole new operating system for international relations. We are moving away from the slow, consensus-heavy UN model towards something faster, more transactional, and arguably much more ruthless.
Okay, so that's our mission today. Let's unpack this thing. We need to figure out what this board actually is, why President Donald Trump is sitting at the head of the table,
Right.
why countries like Spain and Germany are recoiling from it, and why analysts are using this phrase, the monetization of diplomacy.
It's a fascinating, if very complex, shift.
So let's start with the architecture. If I'm a listener who just tuned in and I hear Board of Peace, I'm assuming it's a UN body. I mean, the UN handles peace, right? That's their job.
Well, yes and no. And that ambiguity is, I think, actually by design.
Oh, interesting.
If you look at the press releases from the White House,
Yeah.
they emphasize that this is a multinational initiative to support the ceasefire and manage the governance of Gaza. They frame it as filling a vacuum.
Okay.
The war destroyed the old governance structure, so something has to step in to, turn the lights back on, pave the roads, manage the borders.
That makes practical sense. Someone has to do the work. But where does the authority come from? Is this just the U.S. declaring itself in charge, or is there a legal basis?
There is a legal basis, but it's a
not-
little twisted. It stems from UN Security Council Resolution 2803,
Right.
which was adopted late last year, late 2025.
The stabilization resolution, I remember that one.
Correct. So Resolution 2803 authorized a multinational stabilization force, and it called for transitional governance arrangements.
Okay, so it gave the green light.
It gave the legal green light for an international body to take the reins. But, and here's the massive caveat, usually when the UN passes a resolution like that, the mission that comes out of it is a UN mission. You get blue helmets.
Right, you get a special envoy, the UN logo on the trucks.
All of it. And that is not what's happening here.
Not even close.
Not even close. The U.S. took the authorization from the resolution, but then built the execution completely outside the UN structure. This board operates independently. It doesn't report to the UN Secretary General. It reports to its own chair.
Let's talk about that chair, because this is the part that's grabbing all the headlines.
It is. The inaugural chair of the Board of Peace is President Donald Trump. Now, having a U.S. president lead an initiative isn't new, but the internal documents suggest the tenure is unique.
Unique how?
The suggestion is that the chairmanship isn't a rotating position. In most international bodies, the EU, the Security Council leadership rotates. You get your turn. The reporting on this suggests this chair position might be held indefinitely, or as some of the harsher critics in the European press put it, for life.
For life. That's a massive departure from democratic norms. It sounds less like a diplomatic committee and more like a corporate board with a CEO who has tenure.
That is a very, very apt analogy. And beneath the chair, you have two distinct arms. First, the International Stabilization Force, the ISF. That's the muscle.
Security, policing.
Exactly. Then you have the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza.
National Committee. That sounds local. Who's running that? Are there Palestinians involved?
It's designed to be the Palestinian face of the whole operation.
Yeah.
It's a technocratic administration. The documents point to Dr. Ali Shaf as the likely head.
I know that name. An economist, right?
A very well-respected figure, yes. Very much a technocrat, not a politician. The idea is that this committee handles the day-to-day Grind schools, hospitals, sewage, the power grid.
So the committee fixes the potholes, but the board holds the checkbook and the ultimate authority.
Precisely. The committee is the civil service. The board is the executive government.
This was the part of the research that really just stopped me in my tracks. I mean, we think of post-war reconstruction as foreign aid. Countries pledge money, for humanitarian reasons or to gain soft power. This feels different.
It's explicitly transactional. It's what we're calling the pay-to-play controversy.
Okay, break down the numbers for us. How does a country get a seat on this board?
Well, according to the reporting on the draft charter, influence is directly tiered based on financial contribution. The magic number that keeps popping up in diplomatic cables is $1 billion US.
$1 billion, just to get in the room.
A cool billion. If a wealthy state contributes that amount to the reconstruction fund, they secure what's described as a permanent role on the board.
So let me get this straight. In the UN, you get a vote because you are a sovereign nation.
Right.
Even a tiny island nation has a voice. In this board, you get a vote because you wrote a check.
That is the critique. It shifts the entire logic from sovereign equality to shareholder rights. It's like buying a seat on a corporate board. If you own enough stock, you get a say. If you don't pay, you're an observer.
That explains the phrase monetization of diplomacy. It literally puts a price tag on geopolitical influence.
It does. And for the architects of the plan, the U.S. administration, they would argue this is a feature, not a bug. Their argument is essentially, look at the UN. It's broke. It's slow. It's bureaucratic.
We need results.
We need actual capital fast to rebuild Gaza. This model ensures the people making decisions are literally invested.
Skin in the game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They argue it's about efficiency. They'd say, we don't need debates. We need bulldozers and cement. But to traditional diplomats, it looks like a hostile takeover of global governance.
I can't imagine this went over well in every capital. So let's look at the guest list. If the cover charge is $1 billion, who's showing up to the party?
The early adopters are largely from the region. We're seeing the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. They've either joined or endorsed the framework.
That seems pragmatic. Whatever they think of the structure, they need Gaza stabilized. It's in their backyard.
Right. For Riyadh and Abu Dhabi, this is a security imperative. They see instability as a breeding ground for extremism that could spill over. So if this board can get the job done, they're willing to overlook the unorthodox structure.
And they certainly have the capital to buy in.
They do. We've also seen Pakistan accept the invitation in principle. Now, they've raised some questions on the details, but they are at the table.
And then you have outliers like Argentina, which seems a bit random.
It connects to their current foreign policy pivot. They want to be aligned with Washington, and this is the vehicle to do it.
But then you look at the no pile, and it's a who's who of traditional Western allies.
It is so striking. You have a massive rift in the Atlantic Alliance. Spain, Germany, the UK, Canada, all either declining outright or stalling with very, very deep hesitation.
I found the Spanish response particularly sharp. They didn't just say no thanks. They made a legal argument.
Spain was very explicit. The prime minister basically said that joining this board would be a betrayal of the entire multilateral system. Their argument is that international law requires this stuff to be managed by neutral bodies, or the UN.
Not a coalition of the willing.
Not a coalition where votes are bought, exactly.
Yeah.
They see it as undermining the Geneva Conventions.
And Germany, they're usually the mediators.
Germany's in a bind. They're committed to Israel's security, so they want Gaza stabilized. But the EU, as a bloc, is terrified of the precedent. They call it a concentration of powers. They look at a U.S.-chaired system, potentially for life, without UN oversight, and they just see a total lack of checks and balances.
It's a clash of philosophies, isn't it? The U.S. and the paying members are prioritizing results. The Europeans are prioritizing process.
That's the core tension. The Europeans are asking, if we agree to this now, what happens next time? If you can buy a permanent seat on a board that governs a territory, have we just reinvented colonialism with better branding?
Which brings us to the most important perspective, and honestly, the one that gets lost in these high-level discussions. The Palestinians. There are 2 million people living in Gaza. How is this being viewed on the ground?
It's complicated and painful. If you look at the reporting from human rights groups, from Palestinian civil society, the reaction is overwhelmingly negative. They're using terms like trusteeship and neocolonialism.
Because From their view, decisions about their schools and their economy are being made by foreigners in a boardroom thousands of miles away.
Exactly. It strips them of all agency. They argue it's a mockery of self-determination. They aren't choosing their leaders. The board is appointing them.
So even if Dr. Schath is a capable guy,
He wasn't elected by the people of Gaza. He was selected by the board.
but there is Palestinian involvement with that national committee, is that not seen as legitimate at all?
It depends who you ask. The Palestinian Authority has signaled a willingness to cooperate. They're desperate to regain a foothold in Gaza, and they likely see this board as the only game in town. So they're playing ball.
A necessary bridge, maybe?
They'd see it that way. But Hamas rejects it entirely. The board's charter has strict disarmament clauses. They see this as a mechanism to dismantle them under the guise of aid.
And they see Dr. Schath's committee as a puppet government.
Right. Installed by their enemies.
What about the average person, the family just trying to rebuild their house?
The reporting suggests a mix of profound cynicism and just desperation. You have to understand, the humanitarian need is absolute. People need food, cement, safety.
Of course.
But there's a deep fear of what analysts call aid as leverage.
Meaning, we'll feed you, but only if you behave.
Essentially, the fear is that aid becomes conditional. You get a grant to rebuild, but only if you sign this security pledge. You get electricity, but only if you accept the board's appointed local council.
It creates a system where survival is tied to political compliance. That's a precarious dynamic.
It is. It forces people to choose between their political dignity and their physical survival. And it raises a huge question of legitimacy. Can a government really be stable if the people see it as an imposition? Even if it delivers paved roads, will it ever be accepted?
That is the billion-dollar question. So let's zoom out. We've looked at the board, the money, the impact. But you said earlier this could determine the future of the United Nations. That sounds like hyperbole, but you think the stakes are really that high?
I do. Think about why the UN was created.
Mm.
To manage global security through consensus. If the Board of Peace works,
Define works here.
if it stops the violence, if it rebuilds Gaza efficiently, if the lights stay on and the rockets stop, if the U.S. and its shareholders achieve stability where the UN failed for decades, it sends a devastating message.
The message being that the UN is obsolete.
The message being that the UN Model One Nation, one vote, slow consensus, vetoes, is not fit for the 21st century. It validates the idea that these ad hoc, well-funded coalitions are the future. It says if you want peace, you don't go to the General Assembly, you go to the highest bidders.
And President Trump has hinted this isn't a one-off.
Not at all. He's suggested the Board of Peace model could be franchised. He explicitly mentioned Ukraine and Venezuela.
Wow. So imagine a board of peace for Ukraine.
Structured the same way. Pay-to-play seats, U.S. oversight. Bypassing the UN Security Council because Russia wouldn't have a veto, it just wouldn't be on the board.
It turns peace building into a product. You create a franchise, find investors, and you execute.
A franchise where the shareholders call the shots. It moves us toward a world where money and raw power dictate the terms of peace, rather than international law. It's effective, perhaps, but it's not democratic.
It really feels like a fork in the road. On one side, the traditional order. Slow, often ineffective, but built on a foundation of equality and law. On the other side, this new board. Fast, well-funded, but transactional and unaccountable.
And the scary part is that the world might be ready to make that trade. After years of watching conflicts drag on, a lot of people might look at the UN and ask, what have you actually fixed lately? If the board offers a solution, even an undemocratic one, the world might take it.
That's a heavy thought. If the price of peace is the end of the democratic international order, are we willing to pay it?
That's the gamble. And we are watching the dice roll right now.
So let's just recap. This is a lot to take in. We have a new U.S.-led Board of Peace governing Gaza, chaired by Donald Trump. It's based on a UN resolution, but operates totally independently.
Right.
It uses a pay-for-seats model. $1 billion gets you a vote, which has alienated key European allies, but brought in wealthy Gulf states.
And on the ground, it's setting up a technocratic government. It puts Palestinians in office, but keeps the ultimate power with the board. It's a collision of humanitarian necessity and raw geopolitical ambition.
So what's the one big thing our listener needs to take away from this? When they see Board of Peace on their screen tomorrow, what should they be thinking?
They should think of it as a test case. We are watching a live experiment in a new world order. This isn't just about Gaza. It's a fundamental challenge to how we handle post-war reconstruction.
It's pitting state power and money against international law.
And the outcome of this experiment will ripple far beyond the Middle East. It's going to determine the future relevance of the United Nations.
Which leaves us with a final thought to chew on.
Here's the question I want you to consider. If the Board of Peace actually succeeds, if it stabilizes Gaza, rebuilds the homes, and stops the dying terms, will the world care that it bypassed democratic norms? Will we care that the seats were bought and paid for? Or are we witnessing the moment where we collectively decide that the United Nations, as the primary broker of global peace, is simply legacy tech?
A chilling possibility.
Efficacy versus legitimacy. That does it for this deep dive. We'll be watching closely to see how this board evolves. Thanks for listening.